All right, guys, welcome back to my workbench. I'm Bobby Harris, and I want to go over kind of part 3 of this segment of my forever build. Don't know what's on my shoulder there. Still there. Anyway, today we're working on my 308, the gun that I talked about as my forever gun. I've gone through the process of doing a lot of machine work to the gun. We've fluted the barrel. We've cut the barrel down. We've threaded the barrel for suppressor, had a thread protector built, fluted the bolt, put fastening on the bolt shroud, did a lot of work to it. Some of it cosmetic, some of it functional, like cutting the barrel down and adding the threads for suppressor. That was the primary reason for all of this. Went through and Cerakoted the entire thing a tungsten gray, like we had talked about before. And like I said, I'm filming all this on my phone, so bear with me. We've got a nice tungsten gray coating on this. I've kind of got some black things out here so you can kind of tell. It's no longer blue. It's kind of a grayish, got a little bit of metal flake in it, but not much, enough to see it with your eye, but not enough for it to be, visible in a hunting situation. Now, what we went through earlier is we put the bolt all back together. I've got everything back together and functioning properly, all greased up and ready to go on the bolt. And now we're moving on to what I call part 3, and we're talking about triggers. And so this is the Remington trigger that I took out of the gun. I'm going to go ahead and set the phone down so I can talk to you guys and work on the gun at the same time. I'm going to attempt to put this trigger in without screaming. Sometimes I get some of the little pins and springs, and everything goes a lot of different directions, so you've kind of got sometimes it's a little headache for me, but regardless, I'll get it in and get it functioning. Once again, this is the trigger I took out of the gun. This is a pre-Exmark trigger. Once again, like I told you in the previous videos, this particular gun was manufactured in 1996. I ran all the numbers on it before I bought it just to make sure of the particular gun that I was getting. I got a good high quality gun that doesn't have a lot of rounds down the barrel. The barrel looked good when I kind of scoped everything on the inside, and it all looked real good. I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this trigger. Some of the earlier Remington triggers were pretty good, so I don't know if this is one of them or not. I've got to do a little bit more research, but I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and hang on to this and, just see what I can do with it a little bit later. Maybe there's another build I can use it on, and I'll hang on to it. I've got 2 or 3 of these Exmark Pro triggers that I've thrown in the drawer here. But this one, I'll kind of keep it segregated as maybe a potential for the future. Not real fond of the Exmark trigger. It's good. It can work, but all the adjustments on it, I'm just not real fond of. So here's what we're doing. We are upgrading to TriggerTech. So the TriggerTech Primary is the one I've got, not the expensive one. The Primary works great for my application. It's a hunting application. I think I'm catching these on sale. I think I got this through Midway USA. And this particular one, was like a Black Friday sale for, I don't know, 120 bucks, something like that. I mean, it was really cheap. And so I actually didn't even have this gun at the time I bought this trigger, but I like these triggers so much. I knew there would be another build to come along and I would need a TriggerTech. I'm not sponsored by anybody, not sponsored by TriggerTech. So, this isn't like, I'm just telling you what I use, and what I enjoy using is what works, and TriggerTech works for me. Don't get me wrong, I've got a Timney right up there on the shelf, and I'm going to put it in another build. I've got a 300 Win Mag that's going in. I just haven't got to that one yet. Nothing wrong with Timney. I'm just saying, get a better trigger than than a factory trigger. Get a better trigger than that, and you'll enjoy it. I've found TriggerTech works great for my applications, and that's what I like. So, moving on, I'm going to put this trigger in. Here's where the headache comes in. I've totally disassembled this gun because I had to, they always say, don't take that part out because, well, I did all the Cerakoting and everything on this, so it had to be totally clear, totally grease-free. and all that. So I always take the triggers out because, you know, if you try to Cerakote a gun with the trigger in it, there's always oils leaking out of this thing constantly, and it's just a nightmare to try to get all of the internals of this clean. And then when you do, how do you re-oil it without just soaking it down and knowing that you got everything re-oiled properly again? So I always take them out, you know. You know, there's been a case or two where I've done, you know, a Browning that was a little more complicated on the trigger to remove, and I was like, well, I got it clean without having to do all that. But regardless, this is my next step. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my trigger tick and I'm going to put the front end in first. That way I can work on the back end portion of this and not worry about where that's at. So if I can get the pin through here and get it started on the front end. It's pretty easy to get this one started, but since I Cerakoted it, it may be a little tighter than normal, but Cerakote doesn't take up a lot of space, but we'll see here. Maybe easier to go from this side. And once again, there may be editing in this because, you know, the triggers are so small, and, you know, it's just not my forte to put triggers in every day, but I will get it in and get it functioning correctly. So it's just a matter of getting it back together properly. Because at the end of the day, that's critical. This going in without causing a problem. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to edit out this part, but I'm going to take the trigger back out and I'm going to drive the pins through just to make sure they go through fine. You know, like I said, the Cerakoting and all that, you've got to deal with that. So take my little wooden block here and drive this back out. So I may or may not edit this out, but put a little more grease on my pen just as a light coating of film to get it to go through there. I'll grease my other one. All right. Go through the other way. Okay. I think what I may do is put some tape on this gun. Just to protect the edge. Just in case I get too aggressive with the hammer. I do have more Cerakote, but hey, why mix up a new batch if you don't have to? Now, we got the pin roughly halfway through there. You can see it protruding through the hole. I'm going to go ahead and tap it on through, then I'll drive it back out. I'm going to gonna grab a punch that's actually the same size as the pin. As you can see here, it kind of goes through there with no problem. So take the punch and go ahead and drive it on in. I use my fingers a lot for this so I don't scar the gun. It gives me a feel for what's happening with the pin. Okay, now as you can see here, even though the pin's slightly out on this side, just ever so slight, it's almost flush on this side. And this is the part where this has to clear in here, so you can't have it where it sticks out very far. So it's got to be able to have that slot clear right there, and that's what's happening. So that is plenty for the pin itself. I may tap it once or twice more and then drive it right back out. Now I'll come out with it. Now I'll need my block. This time I'm only going to take it out just far enough to clear the trigger. Which, one more tap and I should be there. And I am. All right, so now back to this. I'm going to put the front end of the Trigger Trek in first, which goes in here. I'm actually going to do it while I'm looking through the hole on the other side. And I'll feel through here with this punch. Make sure it goes through. And it looks like it is. So I'm going to go ahead and tap this through. See if I can get that to stay. And it's going, so I'll go ahead and drive it on in with this punch. I always stick my finger right next to the pin like this so I can set the punch and the pin together next to my finger, so if it slips, it's on my finger. And I feel it going in. We're almost through. Perfect. That's where we want to be. You can see the pin. You can see the pin here, right inside there. You might not be able to see it, but it's right there. But it's not protruding through this gap. I can run through here and not hit anything. So we got this pin on this side in right here on the front. And so we'll now proceed to the tricky part of getting the spring and the bolt release back together. I'm going to do the same thing here. I've been trying to lube things as I go, so I'm just going to put just a touch of grease on this just to have some lubrication. All I want is just a film. You see how I've just barely smeared it? You can see just a shiny film on there. You don't want a whole lot. You don't want to fill up that whole thing with it. You just need lubrication on the metal. One, to keep it from rusting. Two, it's got to move back and forth. And so you'll just give it just a little bit. And you can kind of see where it's shiny now, where it's got grease on it. So Let me wipe my fingers again. We'll get ready to put the back end together. So what we're going to do is line up the Trigger Tech with the back end. Start the pin through here. You have to have it on safe to be able to do this because the arm is in the way if you don't, and I mean the safety arm. Thinking about it, I think I did. So we've got to get this in here. Now, of course, it has to sit like this inside this channel. I'm going to go ahead and get it fed in here correctly, and then we'll just see how this fits. But what I've got to do is get this little spring underneath here. It has to hook onto the frame as it's pushing up on this lever, and everything has to line up just like so. Well, kind of like so. It's a little easier to do it with this one. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, I figured out that I went about this backwards. So I'm going to shut this off and I'll get the trigger in, and then I'll come back and edit it back in. See ya. All right, I'm back. And we got the pin in. And so everything's working properly. You can see this is moving back and forth. Probably need more grease on it apparently because it's sticking, see? Got a little Cerakote in that channel. We'll work it a few times and it'll come undone. But, you know, now that we got all that together, we can at least put the bolt in and make sure everything's functioning properly, which I'm sure it is, but we're going to find out. So we'll get the bolt in and start getting all that greased up and working. But, all right, so everything closed back correctly. Let's just go ahead and put it on fire. And, hey, look there. We got the trigger back in. Everything's working. All right, guys. Sorry I kind of had to go off camera for a bit. I just didn't want you sitting there watching me do nothing. Struggle with trying to get that spring back in just right. Like I said, I'm sure there's a better way to do that, you know, than what I was just showing you. But I'm open for suggestions if anybody has one. Just, you know, like I say, keep in mind I'm doing this. You can kind of follow me through my forever gun build, and we'll take a look at it as we go along, and, you know, join me in the next little segment, and we'll try to do some things like get this thing fitted up in the stock and whatnot. I am going to do some epoxy bedding, even though I have a fully aluminum bedded stock. I want to do an epoxy skim coat is what I call it, and just to make sure everything is tight as possible, as reasonably possible. So anyway, come back and see me, and we'll go into the next part of this and, you know, do this together. Guys, thanks. God bless, and have a great day.